So on Friday we started talking about inverse variation. There's a couple things that you need to remember when it comes to that type of variation. So first of all, you need to remember that y varies inversely with x. So that means that whatever is first is going to be y, and whatever is second is going to be x every time. And then the second thing to remember is that if you can use the equation x times y equals x times y, and this will actually help you with most of the problems that you're going to be doing for homework. So problem 4 here, and we are on page 458 in the notes, says Kim lives in a suburb and drives to work in a city. The time t it takes her to get to work varies inversely with her average driving speed s. So we've just learned two things. We've learned what x and y are, just for the purpose of identifying things. So it tells us that time varies inversely, which is y varies inversely, so t is y, with her average driving speed s, which is going to be x in this problem. So when she averages 20 miles per hour in heavy traffic, it takes her 1.5 hours to get to work. So there's our first piece of information. 20 miles per hour, that's our speed, by the way, it takes 1.5 hours. How long does the trip take her if her average driving speed is 50 miles per hour? So there's our second piece of information. So we actually have both sides of our equation. So that tells us that 20 times 1.5 is going to equal 50 times time. Remember, our equation was x times y equals x times y. And so we would multiply 20 times 15, which is, or 1.5, I'm sorry, which is 30. So 30 equals 50t, and then to solve, I'm going to divide both sides by 50. And I get that t equals 3 over 5. And it wants to know how long that trip would take, so that's 3 over 5. Our time was in terms of hours, so that's 3/5 of an hour, which would end up being 36 minutes. So that's how long her entire trip would take, would be 36 minutes. But you could also leave 3 over 5 hours. That would be acceptable as well. So number 5, Boyle's law says that volume of a gas held in a container at a constant temperature varies inversely with the pressure. So I'm going to first identify what x and y are. So it says volume varies inversely, and we normally read that's y varies inversely, so y is our volume, with the pressure, so that's going to be x. And then we know our equation is that x times y equals x times y. So the volume of a particular gas is 8 liters, so that's my volume, at a pressure of 3 atmospheres. So 3 times 8 equals, what's the pressure when the volume is 6 liters? So since volume is my y, that means I don't know x, so it's going to be x times 6. Well, 3 times 8 is 24, and that equals x times 6. If I divide both sides by 6, I end up with x equals 4. So my answer would be 4 atmospheres. It's important to give our answers the appropriate units. So it's important to remember that if something varies inversely, so when we have inverse variation, that means that x times y, when we multiply x and y, we're going to get some constant. There's also direct variation. Direct variation says that when I take y divided by x, I'm going to get some constant. It's important to remember the difference between the two, and the way I remember it is that direct is divide, and I just say that over and over again, direct, divide, direct, divide. So if I need to decide if the data in a table varies inversely or varies directly, which is what this is asking me to do, then I need to decide, remember, if it's inversely, then x times y is going to equal a constant, which we're going to call k. If it's directly, that means that y divided by x is going to equal our constant, k. So we just have to figure out what's happening. So they've done example A for us, so we're going to figure out example B. So if I look at example B, my X's are my S values, are 12, 15, and 20, and my time is 50, 40, and 30. So I have to decide, is it that if I multiply these numbers, do I multiply 12 times 50, 15 times 40, and 20 times 30 and get the same thing, or do I divide them? So we can try, they actually have given us a table here to figure that out. So, and they've very kindly filled in what we're supposed to do. So in this first column here, I'm supposed to multiply S times T, or my speed times my time. Well, 12 times 50 is 600. 20 times 30 is 600. So it looks like this is going to be inverse variation. But we want to make sure, so let's go ahead and divide our time by our speed. So I need to divide 40 by 15, which is going to give me 2.6 repeating. And then I need to divide 30 by 20, which is going to give me 1.5. So notice that these three answers that we got here were all different, so that tells us that it is not direct variation. So looking at our blanks, because the product is constant, then S varies inversely as T. So it says find the time needed to get to the destination when driving at an average speed of 48 miles per hour. Well, remember, so we have a couple equations for inverse variation. We know X times Y equals our constant K, which we can also rewrite as Y equals K divided by X. These are the exact same equation, and that's what they've done here. So T is Y. Our constant was 600 because that's what everything multiplied to give us. And 600 divided by 48 is 12.5. So it would take 12.5 hours to get to that destination if they were driving at a speed of 48 miles per hour. So looking at problem 7, the table gives the number of pages read from a book for various amounts of time. How many pages can be read in 6 hours? So I have to decide, does this table represent inverse variation, or does it represent direct variation? So remember, inverse means if I multiply X and Y, it's the same. Direct means if I divide Y by X, it's the same. So let's start with inverse. So we're going to do 2 times 40, which is 80, and 3 times 60, which is 180, and 5 times 100, which is 500. So notice that it gave us 3 different values for the constant, so that tells us that it is not inverse variation. So we're going to check direct variation. So if it's direct, then Y, which is 40 divided by 2, is going to give us 20, and that should be the same every time. Then I'm going to divide 60 by 3, and that also gives me 20. And 100 divided by 5 is going to give me 20. Notice that every time my constant of variation was the same, so that tells me that this is direct variation. So it's direct variation, and we're actually going to use the equation Y equals KX to solve this. And you're probably wondering, well, where did that equation come from? So keep in mind that direct variation we said was Y divided by X equals K. Well, if I want to get this in Y equals form, which is what I've done down here, then I need to get rid of this X's in the denominator. Well, to get rid of something that's divided, I do the opposite of that, which is to multiply. So I'm going to multiply both sides by X. On the left side, those X's cancel, and that's where I get the equation Y equals KX. And K is our constant of variation. In this problem, that was 600. So Y equals 600 times X. And it asks us what happens in 6 hours. Well, hours would be my time, which is where my X is. So I know that I can plug in 6 for X. So Y equals 600 times 6 is going to give me 3,600. So in 6 hours, they can read 3,600 pages. Problem 8, the table gives the amount in dollars that each person owes when a group of people buys a birthday present for a friend. How much does each person owe when 8 people chip in for the present? So again, the first thing I need to figure out, is this inverse variation or is this direct variation? So inverse means I need to multiply, direct means I need to divide y by x. So I'm going to start with inverse and I'm going to multiply 2 times 40, which is going to give me 80, and then 4 times 20, which is also going to give me 80, and then 5 times 16, which also gives 80. So since all of these were the same, they all gave me 80, then I actually know that this is inverse variation. So I'm not even going to go through the process of finding out if it's direct because I already know the answer. So it was inverse variation, and we stated earlier that our equation we could use was y equals k divided by x to help us find the answers to our problems, and k is our constant, so y equals, in this case, it's going to be 80 divided by x, and they want to know how much does each person owe when 8 people chip in. Well, 8 people is going to be my x value, so I'm going to replace x with 8, so my equation is now y equals 80 divided by 8, and my answer is 10, so each person would pay $10. So just a reminder about your formulas that you can use. For inverse variation, there's 2 formulas, or 3 formulas. So first one is that x times y is going to equal k, which is some constant. That same equation can be manipulated to y equals k divided by x. And that equation right here we would use if we knew the constant of variation, like if we knew that, you know, like on the previous example we looked at, we knew that it was going to cost $80 for this gift, and we just need to figure out how much each person would pay. We can also use the equation x times y equals x times y, and this one you're actually going to end up using for probably a lot of your homework problems, and you use this equation when you're given 3 of your values, like you know one pair and you have one of the other ones. That's when you use that equation. So for direct variation, we know that y divided by x is going to equal k, which is our constant. We also know the equation y equals k times x. And we use this one if we use this first one if we're finding our constant. We use this one if we know the constant. And then if we know 3 sets of data and we're missing the 4th one, we can use y divided by x equals y divided by x. We can set up a proportion. I do not think that you should have to do this on your homework, or at least the last one. You should not have to set that up on your homework because I don't believe you have any direct variation problems that will require that. So remember, for your assignment, you need to do problems 1 through 26 all. And it is due on Wednesday. Even though I am not there, it is still due Wednesday. Good luck.